It's Civil War week. Welcome to the Autzen Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik, Skopil on the show. Yes, I know my name. I got that right. It's the joke. Go back, watch the previous episode this week. Hey, it's Thursday. We've got our fourth week of the college football season here, and it's a game that traditionally has meant a lot for a lot of people in the state of Oregon. It is the Oregon versus Oregon State game. Formerly known as the Civil War. I think people are starting to call it again the Civil War.
I'm very comfortable just calling it the Civil War personally at this point. They never renamed it. If they were serious about it, they would have come up with a new name, and they didn't. So
correct. 12 p.m. kickoff from Autzen Stadium. Games on the Big Ten Network. This should be the final game for Oregon on the Big Ten Network, unless there's going to be some real blowout doozers in Oregon's favor. And TV just doesn't want to broadcast that. But as long as Oregon's got a tiny little number next to their name, this probably is going to be the last Big Ten Network game of the year for the Ducks. You're mandated by 2. The rest of the season looks pretty enticing from a TV perspective. So one maybe small victory there before games even started. But Erik, we just talked about it off air before we were hit record. This Civil War game feels lackluster. If you go back and you listen to the podcast with Angie Machado, our friend from BeaverBlitz.com, a strong contingent of the Beaver fan base doesn't even want to play this series anymore because of, from their perspective, no fault to their own in their eyes, which I think we could push back if we wanted to. We won't on this show. The gap is just insurmountable. And the talent differences between these two teams is drastic. And on top of that, you have an Oregon team that's 6th in the country, 3-0. They've, for the most part, looked pretty damn impressive in all 3 wins. At points, maybe in that third game. And on the flip side, OSU is 0-3. They have looked disorganized. They've looked poorly coached. They don't have nearly the same level of talent as they used to have. And they've been kind of dominated in all 3 of their first games. And so it feels like we're walking into a weekend in which we're walking in to see a punishment put in place. Oregon and Oregon State are drastically different programs right now.
Yeah, and just as somebody who, and I think Matt and I have both been around this rivalry for the entirities of our life, growing up in Eugene and the area. These games used to be extremely meaningful and a lot of fun. And while I think most people who cover Oregon enjoy the fact that they have separated from Oregon State, and I'm sure people who cover Oregon State wish Oregon State's program were better. It is too bad we're at a spot here where it's like a 35-point betting line, which is even larger than the first 3 games. And I thought the first 3 games, 28 points, those felt very decisive in terms of what to expect. 35 tells you the story, that's tells you where this game is at pretty clearly. And I think we're going to probably keep the first half of the show kind of minimal in terms of just the game breakdown, because, I hate to say it, there's not as much to break down. We'll talk about some of the standouts on offense. We'll talk about some things that haven't been as good on defense for Oregon State, because frankly, there hasn't been a lot to really kind of write home about in a positive light, as we kind of get through this. But, just again, as somebody who grew up in Eugene, both Matt and I did, and went to high school here and was certainly following the rivalry even when I was away for college, these games were this was the game of the year pretty much every year. And it is a far cry from that here, where you look up and go, it hasn't even really felt like an Oregon State hasn't felt like a Civil War week in some regards. And I think even the podcast with Angie kind of showed you the story of just like their fans don't expect this game to be competitive. She didn't even want to really talk about what they could do to win. It was more like, what can they do to maybe turn a corner and take a step for the rest of their season. So that part's a bummer. And I also hope that this game continues. I know 2026, it won't. The Oregonian, Matt, we can mention briefly here, has reported that there's some traction for 2027 and beyond, which is, I think, encouraging. I know both Dan Lanning and Bryce Betcher who kind of are the two spokespeople for the rivalry series, if you will, on the team. Dan, obviously, as the head coach, and Bryce is somebody who also grew up in Eugene and understands this series. Kind of pled a little bit, and Bryce in particular on Wednesday, just for like, hey, let's keep this game going. And it sounds like there's been some steps taken to rectify that, which I think is encouraging. But at the same time, I'm also not expecting necessarily in 2027 things to be much better at Oregon State. And Oregon, I imagine, will be right about where they are right now, which is one of the best college football programs in the country.
Yeah, I do believe deep down a lot of this maybe disdain for playing on the Beaver side is just the mentality going and you're not going to win. And because the reason why I bring that up is, let's just play devil's advocate here. Something crazy happens and Oregon State wins this game. Oregon fan will never hear the end of that. And
Facts.
The Beaver fan will celebrate that and will reference that forever. And that tells me deep down you still enjoy playing this game. You still want to play this game. It's just you don't want to play right now because, quite frankly, lack of a better term, you suck and Oregon is significantly better. So I think it should continue. And then Bryce's words were pretty good and pretty forthcoming, and he had a lot of good points. And I think this game matters for both schools, and I think it would be ludicrous for Oregon State financially to walk away from playing this, because you throw out the idea, well, go play anybody else for us to lose to, and that's true, but you won't find anybody else that's Oregon level to come to Corvallis to play at your place in a home game. And you get all the ticket sales from that. You get the season tickets that come from that. And you get the savings of travel when you're away coming to Eugene. Now, I think the bonus here for the Oregonian is that from their reporting for Oregon is they're going to get basically a double dip home game. They're not going to play in 2026, and it's not going to go back to Corvallis in 2027 to kind of resume the trade-off. It's going to stay in Eugene for a second year. So the Beavers won't play in Reser against Oregon until 2028 if that reporting is accurate. But it's going to be good for both sides. I think it's positive. It needs to happen. Both sides should be motivated to play this game. It won't in 2026, which sucks, but hopefully in 2027 it'll be back. Now, real quick, before we dive into just a little bit of Oregon State, let's talk Oregon for a second. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of rumors about DeCorian Moore, Oregon star freshman receiver, the 5-star from Texas, from Duncanville High School. He's been a standout Oregon's first three weeks of the year. We have heard that, yes, something happened in practice this week from an injury perspective. Dan doesn't talk about injuries. He was never asked about injuries related to DeCorian Moore this week. That's basically career suicide for the week for you. If you're the reporter, if you wanted to ask that question, it's like you got to build up a ton of capital with Dan Lanning if you want to cash that in. Based off rumor. But yes, we have heard of it. Erik, you have posted some stuff on the site a couple of days ago, kind of the latest. What do you feel like we're expecting for DeCorian Moore this week?
I think this was a big sigh of relief. Doesn't seem to be serious. Doesn't seem to be something that's going to cost him extensive time, and possibly not saying that's the case. Like, I think the door's open. He plays on Saturday, which when you heard the cart was used to remove him from practice on Monday, didn't feel like that was even in the realm of possibilities. So, and really, like, this is something I know, Matt, we were talking about on the walk over to one of the media things this week, or the walk back, was just like, he's on the Mount Rushmore of guys you couldn't lose. Dante Moore separates as kind of the undoubted number one. I think I would probably even throw like maybe a Mateo over him. Maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. Kenyon Sadiq probably I would put over him just because of the blocking value and the totality of what he does. But the drop off, we were talking about it, like where was this going to go if he missed, the Oregon State game, the Penn State game, and then games after that. Like they were going to have to really reshuffle the deck here at a position group that's had incredible loss already, with Evan Stewart being knocked out for an extended period of time, with Dre Dickey now playing at a community college down in the Bay Area with Dylan Gresham dealing with the neck injury. We should note, I don't think we've said it in the podcast, Justice Lowe, I think, Matt, he traveled to Northwestern,
He traveled, he did not play.
Did not play. So some uncertainty with what happened there. So, you could have looked up and go, gosh, without DeCorian and some of the other guys, do they only have 5 scholarship receivers for some of, for some big games coming up? So it doesn't seem like that's the case, though. And I think that's a big sigh of relief. So we have, I think, worth addressing. I know that's been making through the rumor mill, but it seems like the news is much better than it could have been.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise us either way if he plays.
Yeah.
Or if he doesn't play. I think you can get value out of resting him if there's any inkling that, hey, this just needs more time. I also am a firm believer that if he's healthy to play, he should play. A, because he's still a freshman. He's still getting used to playing the college game. And B, if he's healthy, he needs to be out there because you can't – well, DeCorian Moore would be a tougher loss than another guy, but you can't have another receiver get hurt too. And you don't – the durability of your guys, no matter what position, the more they play, the more likelihood someone gets hurt. So if you can spread that out over another player, that's going to matter as well. All right, let's dive into OSU just for a little bit. We're going to spend 5 minutes on OSU. That sounds crazy to say, but this is a team that offensive line really, really struggles here. And whether it's pass protection or rushing lanes created with their blocking, Dan Lanning's always talked about like this is what the game's decided in a series up front. And I think that can be said for most games, but in particular, this could be similar to maybe Oklahoma State, in which just no time to throw it because Oregon's front seven's so good and Oregon State's offensive line, quite frankly, has just been so bad.
Yeah. And one of the stats I just pulled up before we jumped on here, Matt, was I hate to bring back this game, but I will. 2022, when Oregon lost, Oregon State ran for 263 yards. So 3 weeks this season, they have a 213, I think. So they ran for more in one game that season, very memorably. And that was why they won that football game. Like they ran and they didn't have to throw the football the whole run that they had in that rally to come back and stun Oregon. And again, one of the more confounding, I was just texting with a buddy earlier, it was like one of the more confounding losses I've covered in my career. That and like 21 Stanford, I think, popped in my head of like just the weirdest, like ow, and like what happened? Like they lost this one. The other team shouldn't have really been in position to. Anyway, that puts that into perspective a little bit. And frankly, like when Oregon State played Texas Tech last week, Anthony Hankerson, who ran for 1,000 yards last year, was one of the better, non-Power 5 running backs a season ago. 11 carries, 12 yards. And I don't think that's on Anthony Hankerson. I think that's on, like you said, Matt, the offensive line. So I don't expect it to be much better against Oregon. Now, I will say, like, Oregon's rush defense and our
Northwestern wasn't
great. Yeah, and our student writer, John Evans, wrote pretty extensively last night about it. If you want to go check it out over on the site, I think that's worth your time. It was a good story. So this is at least maybe going to be an opportunity to prove yourself, because this was an Oregon State run offense that couldn't get any traction against Texas Tech. They ran okay against Fresno State. Actually, I think Hankerson had like 130 something yards in that game, and then couldn't do anything against Cal. So the two Power 4 teams they've played, they've run for like, I think, a combined barely over 100 yards, right? So you go into this one, you go, you got to be able to shut that part down. I expect they will. And then the other part on offense is, hey, they have the big arm quarterback. Dan came out and called Malik Murphy like one of the stronger arm quarterbacks they've seen. Jerry Mixon said he looks kind of like Cam Newton physically. He's just a big, strong guy. He can throw the ball a mile. They don't really have, and this is one of the things Andy said, and kind of looking into it, they don't really have the receivers to make that work. Like they don't have a Malik Benson or DeCorian Moore or somebody like that who can just take the top off and beat you with 10-3, 100-meter speed. No, they've got guys that are more possession receivers, and that's fine and good in certain matchups, but where you're going to need some explosive passes, I don't know if they necessarily have that. And that's something that stood out from Theron Johnson, was like, hey, there's certain routes we'll just let them have. I think they're going to be pretty comfortable letting them have some stuff underneath and just not giving them anything over the top.
Yeah, Trent Walker is a good receiver, and
Very good,
quite honestly, would probably be a regular contributor, if not a starter, at Oregon this season.
Have a chance to, yeah.
Yeah, like he would definitely be in the rotation. I don't know if he would start, but he'd be in the conversation. But he can't be your number one guy, or he can, but you got to have two guys that can go over the top to open everything up in the middle for him, and they don't have that. Tez Reddix is okay. David Wells is okay. They both have 100-yard games this season already. All three of them actually do. But I think a lot of that, and Oregon State ranks inside the top 25 for most passing yards per game. And you look at their passing yards per completion, and it's a solid number as well. But I think a lot of that, Erik, is because they've fallen behind by such large numbers that they've not been able to be balanced, and they can't run the football on top of that. So this is going to be one of those games where Oregon kind of knows what's coming because they can probably stop the run without having to load the box up with a ton of guys, and then instead drop maybe one extra guy into coverage, which will make life hard. And I'm curious to see kind of what the game plan is for Oregon State offensively. Do you do the deep drop backs and try and air it out deep and expose Malik Murphy to hits, sacks, and potential balls getting, floated in the air a little bit for interceptions? Does that happen, or do they kind of eliminate the sacks but eliminate their explosiveness and try and dink and dunk their way down the football field? I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Defensively, I'll be honest, Erik, like historically to me, they always have good linebackers. They always have sound defense. And Dexter Foster at linebacker, he's a sophomore. He's like their highest rated PFF guy. But they just don't have the typical big name that's missing. And their secondary is okay. There's a couple Ducks on this team. Tavita Pomey starts at defensive tackle. Jalil Tucker starts at one of the cornerback spots. Oregon was really close with Rajon Davis when he was in high school. So there's a couple of guys on this team, but again, like this could be a similar outcome to Oklahoma State. Not saying that Oregon's going to score on their second possession and then third possession, but it wouldn't surprise me if Oregon's explosiveness on offense can translate to multiple touchdowns in the first quarter, and we're looking at like a 21-0 type performance just because of how quickly they could score.
Yeah. Well, I just want to correct myself. Oregon State had 73 rushing yards combined against Cal and Texas Tech. I said they had over 100. That was wrong. I just wanted to confirm that. You're right. And like Texas Tech just torched them, almost 600 yards, 45 points. They threw the crap out of the football, like 480 yards through the air. I think Oregon will run the ball probably more effectively than that, or will at least attempt to set it up. And again, based upon Northwestern, there's some stuff to prove there. Although I think of the two sides of the ball, I think the run defense was a little more discouraging than the run offense for me coming out of that week. It's not to say everything was peachy keen and perfect on offense, but this is a game I don't have a ton of concerns when Oregon has the football, right? And like one thing, and I kind of wish he was made available this week. He wasn't, but this is kind of a revenge game for Dante Moore. Like he got pulled as a starter at UCLA because he had 3 interceptions in Corvallis back in 2023. This is going to be his first time playing that program again in a game he starts, obviously. And like he's been on a heater. We probably haven't even discussed how great he's been enough on our podcast, to be honest with you. Like he's in the Heisman race. He deserves to be there. He's super accurate. The decision-making. I mean, again, you talk about the fact this guy lost the starting job because he threw the ball to the other team a lot. He's been so incredibly I think he's made good decisions like almost every time he's thrown the football. I know people were disappointed he threw a pick to close the Northwestern game. Going back and watching it under the lens of there was a lot of wind, and again, I wasn't there, so I was just watching it on television. The defensive player made an incredible play, dropping all the way back there. It was not all that underthrown. It was actually like DeCorian almost made a play on the ball still, even though it was intercepted. I buy that. So I don't expect there to be a ton of resistance here. Oregon's offense has been clicking all season. Had punted twice or once with the first team offense, I think. Don't expect it to be a game where we see a whole lot of James Ferguson Reynolds or Ross James or whoever's out there. Not to be too limiting or too reductive to the Beavers. I just don't see it from them, to be honest. And I think this is going to be another game where Oregon's going to be really, really versatile offensively, really balanced. I mean, that's been kind of the key this season is, the total offense splits. Let me just pull this back up. I closed the tab a second ago, but if you pull up the total offense splits, they've got 741 yards rushing, 769 yards passing. I mean, it's been about as balanced as you could be this year. I fully expect them to have success in both phases on Saturday. You're muted here, Matt.
Oops, sorry. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll start diving into our bold predictions for Saturday afternoon. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. It was an interesting week for us, Erik. With these
it was a bad week for me. I know that. I didn't get anything right.
Yeah, 0 for 4 for Erik. I went 2 for 2, and that feels like I won, but like that feels bad. Like that's not a good number to win on.
You nailed a couple though. Like you had the whole Northwestern wouldn't score in the first 3 quarters. You got that one.
I had Deer Hill on the 65 yards. Right. He went for 66 on one play. But outside of that, again, some rough sledding for me as well. I'll lead off first. Let's go offense first. Team offense. I've gone back and forth here because I think this is breaking news. I have Oregon winning this game by a lot. I've gone back and forth though, just like kind of how prolific I think this team's going to be. It's a rivalry game, but I also don't think nothing from Oregon State side has kind of come out and been like stoking the fire a little bit. And I don't get that feel that Lanning's going to purposely run the score up like he did maybe on Oklahoma State or maybe like he did against Colorado in 2023. So like the rivalry aspect will play a factor here a little bit. They'll keep their starters in until it deems necessary to pull them. But I think Oregon's going to dominate, obviously. So I'm going to go 300 yards passing and 300 yards rushing in this game. I think Oregon's going to go over 630 yards. Because quite frankly, even if Dan Lanning calls off the Dogs, I think Oregon's second team unit is, especially at the skill positions, and in particular, a De'Are Hill or a Jay Harris or a Jamari Johnson at tight end. Like these are still dudes that would probably start at Oregon State and are going to be the better players on the field still. And they're going to rip off some scores. And I think whether it's Luke Moga or Austin Novosad, whoever plays, especially if it's Luke Moga, you got to give him some like legit game reps in the event that something, knock on wood, happens to Dante Moore. So I think they're going to throw it out a little bit more and just to let him kind of maneuver and see what he can do in game situations. So I'm going 300 rushing and passing in this game.
Whew. I like that. That's going to take a strong effort.
Lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I was thinking more because I'm with you. Like if we look at the way the first 3 games have played, the first team offense has been off the field sometime in the third quarter. I think that's probably likely to happen again. I'm anticipating that's my expectation right now, at least. So I'm going like, what could they do, even if it's not a massive number of drives? And I go back to kind of like Oklahoma State and that explosive offense and just how many like downfield plays. And I've got 3 or more 40 or 40 or more yard plays. So big explosives, right? Like I think they count 25 rush, 15 pass, or sorry, flip that. 15 rush, 25 pass count as explosives based upon at least what the stat broadcast uses. I'm going 40 plays of either. I think those are big explosives, and I just think there's a likelihood Oregon hits a Malik Benson. Maybe DeCorian does play, hits him there. Incorporates Kenyon Sadiq after the catch, where he's able to just run through some guys. We talked about kind of maybe not being. I think the linebackers may be one of the strengths of that defense. I don't know if they're necessarily on par or capable of really containing a Sadiq if he gets ahead of steam and finds green grass. So I like them to have some explosives, but kind of go back to sort of what they were doing a couple weeks ago, in part because to this point in the season, I haven't really seen Oregon State play that sort of the defense, at least with any level of success that they played against that Northwestern played a week ago, where they kind of the too high and forced them to go 12, 15 yard, 12, 15 plays downfield. So I like some explosives. They give me 3 plays of 40 or more yards.
I really like that because I think that's going to hit. And quite honestly, Eric, you might hit that in the midway point of the second quarter.
I hope so. Be fun to hit one. I don't. I've been over for a bit here. Been tough.
Can I make a slight change to mine? Just make 600 yards of offense or more instead of 300.
I'll allow it.
Okay. Just for context, I knew that was a high number, but just for context, I went back and looked. Dan Lanning's teams have only done that 5 other times. 600 yards or more of offense. So, all right. Team offense or individual offense. I'm kind of going back to the well here. I'm going to raise it a little bit. De'Aaron, 75 yards all-purpose plus a touchdown. I think this is.
Ooh.
I asked Dan Lanning about this week. Of his stats are insane, and I think there's a fine balance of just enough De'Aaron Hill, too much De'Aaron Hill, and you got to get more De'Aaron Hill. And I think they're still figuring what that balance is. And I don't know. I just think he's going to go for 75 all-purpose yards, and he's going to score another touchdown. And we're going to continue to go. Like, this guy has to play, and it's very clear why he's playing above a transfer like Mekhi Hughes.
Yeah, I continue to feel like he might do that in 4 or 5 touches, right? Like, that's been kind of last game people probably forget he had 7 snaps played and he had almost 100 yards of total offense. This guy, when he touches the ball, has been extremely explosive. I know, 2/3 of that came on one play. But I like going back to the well there. I'm going to go back to another. I think I've had a couple props here this year. Dante Moore. I'm going season high in passing. I think I went for 300 yards against Oklahoma State. He had 266. I kind of mentioned I think they're going to have some success throwing the ball down the field over the top. Give me 267 or more yards through the air for Dante Moore for his Oregon high. And I did go back and look, and I almost went this route, but then I would basically be back to predicting 300 yards. He did throw for 290 yards twice back in 23 at UCLA against San Diego State and Washington State. So if you're curious on his career high, it's a little bit more than what he's done this year, but I'll stick with 267 for the season high for the Ducks.
I think the only hindrance for Dante Moore to not hit 300 is just how long he stays in the game.
Yeah.
Like if he comes out and is lights out in the first half, there is zero reason to play him in the second half. And I think that's going to be your only hindrance, because I think Oregon could do whatever they want in this game. If they want to score 80 points, they could score 80 points. If they want to score 450 yards through the air, they could throw 450 yards through the air. They could be successful if they didn't want to run the football every single down. Like, that's the type of disparity here. So I like that. I think that's going to happen. That feels like a good get win for you there. All right, team defense. I've gone back and forth too of just maybe how good is Oregon's defense this season, and kind of the matching up the depth a little bit. Dan Lanning's defense this year, the total yards allowed, the lowest numbers, 211 against Oklahoma State. The lowest last season was 172 at UCLA. I'm really close to thinking something like that. I'm going to go Oregon defense holds the Beavers 201 or less.
Total offense?
Yes.
I'm kind of in the same boat here. I'm focused on the run game, in part because I think that's like the one question mark right now for this team. And again, through 2 weeks, people were getting mailbag questions of like, is the red zone offense a problem? Like, what's going on? Like, there wasn't a whole lot to nitpick. And Northwestern, you could kind of see like, hey, like the rush defense at times wasn't great. And, the rush offense at times wasn't great. And I think this is a game where, going into Penn State, where we know that team as a rush offense is as good as anybody in the country, 2 of the better backs, Oregon has played during Dan Lanning's time here. They carved up Oregon pretty good on the ground in Indianapolis from the Big Ten championship game. We know that that's going to be kind of a matchup that we're circling and highlighting and talking about going into that one. So I think this is going to be a get-right game for the rush defense. And I was looking at it back in – mentioned the 2022 game and how they ran all over Oregon. 2023, in a dominant Oregon win at Autzen, 53 rush yards for Oregon State. So I'm going 53 or fewer in this game. I'm specific to that stat there. I think they're going to, again, not that Northwestern feels anywhere as disappointing or didn't cause them to lose the game, but this is another situation where they're coming off a kind of a bummer of a rush defensive game. I think Oregon's going to be motivated, and I think that's going to be a focal point, much like it was against Montana State. So I've got 53 or fewer rush yards for the Beavers.
I really like that. And the sneaky aspect here is the number of sacks that Oregon can get.
Sure is.
That could play into that. And that kind of ties right into mine for my defensive individual. This didn't happen, but I'm going to hit again. I'm going to double down, as I guess Dan Lanning's phrase is this year for the team. Blake Purchase gets a sack in this one. I got a feeling it's coming. Maybe the snap counts go up a little bit in this game. Blake Purchase records his first sack of the season. I'm going to make it easy. I'm not going to add like 1.5 tackles for loss. Just one sack. Blake Purchase gets one sack. And I think from a bigger perspective, I think there's going to be a ton in this game. I really like Oregon. If we were going to do a side bet or something, I would say like 3.5 sacks, 4 sacks for Oregon's defense in this game.
Yeah, a couple of things on just Oregon State and the susceptibility for sacks. I was just looking at this, and mine ties in as well. I've also got a sack prop here in a second, but there are 2 tackles. Josiah Timoteo and Jacob Anderson have PFF pass blocking grades of 45.3 and 54.7, which, if you're unfamiliar, is very bad. It's not good. You also think like there have been teams that have been like where they had like a mobile quarterback and they've been able to like get out of the way. And Malik Murphy has some incredible physical tools in terms of like he's got an NFL arm, he's got NFL size. He does not have like this is not, and maybe this is a bad example because Oregon sacked him 10 times last year. But this isn't like Damon Williams where he can get out and make things happen and avoid pressure. Like if you get there, you're probably going to bring him down, assuming you take 2 arms and have the strength to pull him down. Because again, he's like a 235, 240 pound quarterback. So my prop actually here, and you can tell me if this is cheating, Matt, and I can shift, but I think both Tatum and Mateo are going to eat in this game. Could be both final, probably will be. I think actually will certainly be their final rivalry games because neither are going to be playing in the 2026 Civil War because there won't be a 2026 Civil War. But I think they're going to be motivated to have big games. So I bet that each having at least 1 full sack and a combined 3 between the 2 of them. Is that a cheat there, including 2 players, Matt?
I'll let you have it. I'll let you have it. You let me change mine. So
okay.
I'll let you have it.
We're going 3 combined sacks for those 2 guys here. And I'm hoping, crossing the fingers, they don't have like 2.5, and then I feel bad for rounding up there. But I just think they're going to be involved a lot, and I think Oregon's going to have some success. And honestly, like speaking to like why it doesn't happen, it may just be a case of like, does Oregon State's offense have enough opportunity to even drop back and throw the ball, or is it just going to be short drive, 3 and outs, turnovers? I mean, as much as we've liked Malik Murphy and probably didn't talk enough about just kind of the physical tools he has today on this podcast, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He has put the ball up for grabs a little bit this year. A turnover in this game from him, or 2 or 3, doesn't feel outrageous to me.
Real quick, it felt like Oregon State, they're trying to be someone that they can't be anymore. They're trying to be a Power 4 school and not embracing the analytic or the roster construction of a really good Power 4 group of 5, group of 6 school. They spent a lot of money on NIL to bring Malik Murphy to Oregon State. Mm-hmm. And it almost feels like that money would have been better spent maybe if you spread it out to 2 or 3 guys on the offensive side of the football, particularly the offensive line and maybe another receiver, and go cheap on the quarterback position, find a bounce back guy or something of that nature. Although Malik was kind of a bounce back guy, but you didn't have to spend all this money Because now you've got this problem where you've got this great quarterback who's got the cannon, but you can have the greatest quarterback in the world, and if you can't protect him, he's useless. And that kind of feels like what Oregon State has, from a roster construction standpoint, has done. Maybe they shouldn't have invested so much money from an NIL perspective on just one player offensively, maybe spread it out a little bit, because a lot of these problems, they've got talent. Hankerson's a good running back. Malik Murphy's certainly got the physical attributes that you want to see. Trent Walker is a really solid receiver for them. They don't have enough time to do anything. Yeah. And so, like, to your point, like, yeah, I think Oregon's they're gonna feast defensively. They're Oregon's matchup front seven wise is gonna be fun to watch, and it's gonna, unless you're an Oregon State fan, Malik Murphy, because it's not gonna be fun.
I don't think Malik's going to have a fun Saturday in Eugene. No. That's a bold, not a very bold prediction. That's an unbold prediction. It's a light prediction.
All right, team prediction or score predictions here. I'll be honest, Erik. I have my number, and I feel like it's incredibly low. Because my first number that I threw out, it was just so high, and yet I feel that's easily attainable. I think the talent disparity here has been as wide as it's been in a long time in this series. I think Oregon's kind of on a mission right now. Dan Lanning's had all week to kind of hammer home, you guys didn't have the killer instinct. I'm sorry if it's our walk-ons against Northwestern starters. Like, to hell with that. We didn't finish strong. We didn't finish the fourth quarter like we wanted to. I think this team's going to be coached up really hard. I thought it was interesting that he was pissed off on Wednesday about the team's effort from Tuesday's practice. I think he's trying to ramp things up and trying to get Oregon to go to just even another level. And we might see that kind of be put together on Saturday. Oregon has the best player on the field, both sides. They've got probably the second, third, fourth, and fifth best player on the field on both sides of this game. And when you have those situations, it's incredibly difficult for this game not to get out of hand. I think weather, I think illness, freak injury, those are the types of things that could turn this game from being an utter dismantling into a boring, ugly, kind of lower scoring type performance. Nothing to do with what Oregon State's going to do on the football field. I think the first team offense and the first team defense will be done at halftime. I think we'll continue to see some points scored in the third quarter. And then in the fourth, it'll be pretty just mundane as both teams are just trying to get out of there, run the clock and whatnot. I've got Oregon 56, Oregon State 10. But I quite honestly, I don't feel like I gave enough points to Oregon's side on this game.
I think 56 is a good number.
It's a good number. I'm not going to be surprised if they go for 70.
I think it's hard to see them getting there, just because I like you. I think it seems like the modus operandi has been like you play Dante the first series of the second half, maybe more if the games. I mean, the Northwestern game, right? He played a couple series. I just think he's going to play the whole first half, maybe a series in the second half. He'll leave the game, and it's hard to expect them to have, already scored 50 points at that point, and then for the backups to do it. And remember, like, the reason they got to 69 against Oklahoma State was the defensive touchdowns, right? Like, that was a 55-point game that became a 69-point game in like a blink of an eye. So I think that's a fair number. I'm really close. We almost have been every week this season. I think the exception being the Oklahoma State game, and that's kind of a shame on me week because I got that one wrong, and it was like the most lopsided win in forever, and forever against an FBS Power 4 team. But I've got Oregon 52, Oregon State 14. I think there might be, and maybe this continues to be the talking point, a case of Oregon dominates 3 quarters, fourth quarter there's a little bit of Beaver success. That's where maybe they find the deep shot, or maybe they're able to drive the ball down the field and score another touchdown. This game to me feels similar to the first two, where I think at half it's going to be 35 to 7, 38 to 7, in that range. And then second half is the first team offense comes out, maybe gets a drive, scores more points. You see them leave, and then it's, can the reserves do anything? Does the defense put them in position with some turnovers or some scoring of their own? But I'll go 52-14 in a game that, again, I think this is going to be a week where not a lot's really going to translate to Penn State, but you're going to leave, I'm expecting, feeling like, okay, this was much more savory. This felt more like what I wanted to see from a team we think can go across the country and beat the number 2 ranked team. I think that's where we're going to leave, and kind of how we're going to feel leaving this one is, sure, it wasn't perfect, but it was a step ahead of where they were against Northwestern. Not a lot of this is going to translate, because Oregon State and Penn State are about as disparate and far apart as two programs could be. But you're at least going to feel like Oregon looks like the kind of team and played like they needed to set them up to be really competitive and maybe go pull that victory and set themselves up to do something special again in 2025.
Yeah, I to your point, I think you're right. I think people are going to talk more. We're going to get more don't sleep on this Oregon team talk like we did ahead of Northwestern than we did after Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Next time you hear from us, it'll be Saturday afternoon, early evening, following Oregon State. Remember, 12 o'clock kickoff, Big Ten Network. Go to DuckTerritory.com for all our pregame, in-game, post-game coverage. And as always, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.